Okay, so I'm just going to do a quick chat about the studio updates, and I'm going to do a bit of a recap from stuff we was talking about last year, just to make sure everybody's on the same page, because there was something we talked about a lot last year and has now changed, and I want to make sure everyone's aware and familiar with that. Um, and then we'll get into sort of a look at some of the changes. Um, so I guess one of the things that's really important just to highlight is for those that attended lab developer workshops last year, we introduced this sort of giving you a little platform update during the year. And one of the things we talked about was the fact that the Skillable Studio platform was updated on the last Thursday of the month generally. Okay. And one of the things we talked about towards the end of last year was the fact that there was a whole load of work going on in terms of refactoring the code for Skillable Studio to make updates easier, more incremental, those sort of things. And that work, for those that did attend the last Lab Developer Workshop of last year, was sort of coming to an end, and we discussed that. So one of the great things is that work's all done, and it does actually mean that it's actually much easier for us to do much smaller, more incremental updates to the platform. So what you will notice, especially through things like these sessions, you're going to find that actually there's going to have been multiple update windows we're going to talk about. It's unlikely it's just going to be this is what's coming at the end of the month, and there's this big window. So hopefully that's the plan. So just because we didn't do a lab developer workshop in December, just to recap things that we did say were coming, and just wanted to sort of let everybody know. We added some new virtual machine sizes to the Azure fabric. So for those that build virtual machines in Azure, and obviously those that attended the Summer of Cloud that we did, you would notice we have this big list of virtual machines, but we don't have every virtual machine type that's in Azure, because a lot of them are really focused around production use and not necessarily labs and so on. So quite often we normally only add new virtual machine types now because there's a particular customer need, or because there's something really specifically unique about that machine type. So we did add the EAV4 virtual machines for Azure last year, and specifically for those, some Microsoft Enterprise customers get a really competitive price for those, so they're really cheap. So obviously that allows customers to build Azure-based VM labs in our platform and reduce their Azure costs. The other thing we added was the DC VM types. If you're not familiar with those, so these take advantage of a special CPU type. So Intel developed processors that are designed for secure code execution. So to give you a sort of an example, if you think about sort of modern PCs today and modern, of all types, they would often have a TPM module. Okay, and that allows you to do things like secure boot and so on. So think of it as the DC type machines as having a processor that's got an integrated TPM module into the CPU. And what that allows a developer to do is actually lock their code into that secure module, so it can't be tampered with and things. So it gives you this high level of integrity there. So that was the reason we did those. The other thing was we changed the end of lab score report. So if you're do sort of PBT, so scored based labs on our platform, and you turn on the show details options, you might have already seen the end of lab score reports. If not, this is the new end of lab score report. Just to click on the slide, but it looks like now. So it's a little bit more graphical with a little chart. Of course, obviously, it would be red if you failed, or just partly filled in if you didn't get everything right, and again you'd get red X's along the green ticks if you got questions wrong and so on. So this is what it looks like at the moment, and we are investigating ways that we can allow customers to sort of try and brand it a little bit and do some customizations and things. So much better than the previous one, but we also want to try and make this a bit more customer flexible. And we've got a couple of things in the pipeline that we're prototyping with our Challenge Lab products, which customize this a little bit, and then we're trying to see how we might be able to commoditize those to make it easier for everybody else. So if you hadn't seen that, that's the new end of lab score page for our sort of PBT based type activities. We then got to January, obviously at the beginning. So the first thing to notice here is we did an update on the 12th of January, so, what we're actually looking to do is do updates every couple of weeks now based on this new architecture that we've put in place. Obviously, January was obviously the early January update was quite small because we had Christmas and all those bits and pieces in here. But a couple of things, we did have an issue around Azure geolocation. So it's quite an important issue to tell you that we fixed. It didn't always geolocate correctly based on if you had a list of data centers that you had in your Azure cloud profile. And actually, because of some changes in Azure, it allowed us to actually improve some of the default security that we put in place when people used Azure. So it just allowed us to sort of tighten up and make sure there was less opportunity for malicious use, and therefore helping customers control their costs a bit more and so on. So there were some improvements we was able to take advantage of there. So the next update is today. That's the next planned update for today. And obviously, this has been a full development cycle from our point of view, so a couple of weeks. So what's actually been going on in terms of this? So first and foremost, the new dashboard is coming back. Basically, the issue we had with customers that used single sign-on, that's now been resolved. So the new dashboard, even though it was always available, you could type in studio.labondemand, labondemand.com. It's now going to come back. So hopefully tomorrow you'll see the new dashboard, which is great from the point of view of features like Lab Advisor. Even though Lab Advisor was available, it was on the menus and things. It's now going to put that alert right in the front screen, telling you about how many labs that have got particular issues, critical or high issues, whatever they might be. The other thing that's also going to be improved is the context sensitive help. So if you're actually in a configuration page inside Studio, you can press the help, you're going to get better context sensitive help. The other thing that's also then going to do is at the bottom of the help, there's actually going to be a button that says get help as well. Okay, obviously this will be all from tomorrow effectively. And what that will do is it will take you to a route which will allow you not only just to create a ticket, to obviously get assistance. One of the things we're going to do is we're going to auto-populate all of your information into the ticket. So you're not going to have to enter your name and your email address and those bits and pieces. It's all going to be pre-filled. So the idea is you can just focus on what your problem is and effectively the detailed description. Okay, so hopefully that's just going to make requesting help from us more efficient. So we're just trying to sort of improve your productivity. The other thing that we're going to get in the product is a new webhook engine. Okay, and we're going to have webhooks tied to lab profiles and be able to react to different activities with respect to lab instances. So webhooks are something that we've had some limited capability about before. When we did the API session last March, we talked a little bit about webhooks, but we didn't speak much about them. What we're actually going to really have is a far more capable architecture for webhooks and put a lot more control in the hands of our lab developers, and even be able to have bespoke webhooks per labs and things if that's what you want. So that's actually going to make February's Lab Developer Workshop subject. So we'll do some stuff on webhooks. You'll get to play with webhooks, have a look at them, see what they do, what can you use them for. So this can be really useful, obviously for customers that have API integrations with us. But even if you don't have an API integration with us, there are still places that potentially you might find to actually use webhooks if you want to send data from a lab instance somewhere else externally. So that could be quite powerful. So that's going to be February's Lab Developer Workshop for those that might want to consider registering in the next week or so. The other thing that's also going to change is we're actually going to enable customers to have access to some API consumer configuration data and modify some of the settings as well. Okay, so again, there is some webhook configuration on the API consumer. You're going to potentially get access to modify that. You're also going to have access so that you can do things like rotate your API key if you needed to. Okay, this is all going to be behind a separate set of permissions. So no lab developers will get this by default. So if you log in tomorrow morning and go looking for your API consumer because you use API integration with us, you won't find it. Okay, because it's got to be requested for access. And of course, if you submit a support request for access to this, there will be a conversation effectively with the account executive and also with effectively the named owner of your customer or who you work for effectively, which of course might be you. Okay, because ultimately, there are some issues here. Just from the point of view of that trust and what can happen. First and foremost, if I go in and do things like rotate the key, that will just break the API integration because, of course, your LMS will not be able to authenticate with us anymore. Potentially, if you've got access to the API key, you could launch labs against the API consumer outside of your LMS, which can incur costs and things. So really, there's a whole set of things we need to make sure before we give somebody access to that, because we don't want people breaking their environments. We don't want people incurring costs and things. So it's got to be someone that's effectively approved by the account owner. So just for reference in terms of those things that are basically getting pushed to production tonight.